Ever felt like life's throwing every single rotten thing at you at once? When one piece of bad news lands and right behind it, another one comes crashing down, even worse. It's like copping a serious diagnosis and in the same breath watching your marriage fall to bits, or when you lose someone you love and in the midst of the grief you find out they've been cheating. But in the end, life always finds a way to turn a proper tumble into a fresh start. And sometimes, what feels like the absolute worst moment is just the beginning of something extraordinary. The silence was heavier than a wet blanket in the living room. Sarah Miller's hands were shaking as she held the medical envelope, still trying to get her head around the words that were echoing in her mind like a distant, cruel whisper. Advanced stage cancer. 48 years old, 20 of them spent with Lucas. And now, this. The diagnosis was a scream trapped in her throat, but she didn't even have a moment to process it when her husband's cold voice cut through the air like a blade. "Sarah, we need to have a yarn." Lucas Carter was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, his face a mask of indifference that she didn't recognize. 20 years of marriage, and she'd never seen that empty look, that distant posture. Her heart went into overdrive, not because of the disease she'd just discovered, but from the frigid distance radiating from the man who'd sworn to love her forever. "Sure, love. I've got something important to tell you too." Sarah tried to smile, tucking the envelope behind her back, as if she could hide the bombshell she'd just copped. "Nah, the word was dry, cutting. I'll go first, and it's not a chat, Sarah. It's a decision." Her world stopped, just dead still. The clock on the wall kept its hypnotic tick-tock, but for Sarah, time froze in that instant. She knew that tone. It was the same one he used in the office when he was closing a deal, making an unchangeable call. But never, not ever, had he used it with her. "Lucas, what's going on?" Her voice was weaker than she'd intended, almost a whisper. He sighed, as if he was already over a conversation that hadn't even started. "I can't do it anymore, Sarah. I can't be bothered pretending I feel anything for you. I can't pretend this marriage makes sense." The words landed on her like rocks, one after another, each syllable finding its target and shattering something inside her chest. Sarah felt her legs give way and she leaned against the sofa, the medical envelope slipping from her hands and landing on the floor with a soft thud. Pretending. The word was strangled. "Lucas, we're happy. We have our ups and downs like any couple, but..." "Happy?" He gave a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. It was bitter, cruel. "Sarah, when was the last time you looked at me and saw desire in my eyes? When was the last time I looked at you and felt my heart race?" She opened her mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. Because deep down she knew. She knew it had been months, maybe years, since they'd lived as polite flatmates. She knew their chats had become a bit shallow, the kisses were mechanical, that love had turned into just a habit. "I want a divorce, Sarah." The sentence exploded into the air like a gunshot. Sarah felt as if she'd been punched in the gut, all the air rushing from her lungs at once. The envelope on the floor seemed to scream the diagnosis she hadn't even managed to share. And now it didn't even matter. But why now?" she managed to ask, her voice cracking. "What's changed? We can talk about it, we can try." "Nothing's changed, Sarah, that's the whole point." Lucas finally moved, walking to the window and staring out, as if he couldn't bear to look at her anymore. "I'm just over the act. I'm over waking up every day next to someone who's become a stranger. I'm over smiling when I feel nothing." "A stranger?" Her voice rose an octave, the pain transforming into something hotter, more dangerous. "Lucas, I'm your wife. I've dedicated 20 years of my life to you, to our marriage, and I appreciate that." He turned around, and for a split second, Sarah saw something that looked like remorse in his eyes, but it lasted only a heartbeat. "But appreciation isn't love, Sarah, and I can't live a lie anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked at the man she loved, searching for some sign of the Lucas she knew, the man who proposed to her under the stars, who cried with joy at the altar, who promised to stand by her through thick and thin. But all she saw was a stranger in a flash suit with a cold heart. "Is there someone else?" It wasn't a question. It was a realization that escaped her lips like a resigned sigh. Lucas hesitated. For a moment, just one moment, she saw the mask slip. That doesn't matter now. Of course it matters. Sarah stood up, the rage finally overpowering the pain. It bloody well does. You're binning a 20-year marriage and you're telling me it doesn't matter. Sarah, please don't make this any harder than it already is. Harder? She laughed, but it was a hysterical, desperate sound. For who, Lucas? For you? Because for me it's already impossible. He sighed again, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she knew well. It was what he did when he was impatient, when he wanted to shut down an uncomfortable conversation. The papers are ready. My lawyer will be in touch with you tomorrow. Me? I'll be staying in a hotel for now. Sarah felt her world crumble around her. It wasn't just the marriage that was ending. It was her whole life, her entire identity. For 20 years she had been Lucas Carter's wife. And now she no longer knew who she was. Lucas, wait. She took a step towards him, her hand outstretched. I've got something to tell you, something important. But he was already heading for the door, his car keys jingling in his hand. Sarah, there's nothing left to talk about. It's better for both of us this way. But The door closed with a quiet click, but for Sarah it sounded like the lid of a coffin being sealed shut. She stood there, frozen in the middle of the room, staring at the door her life had just walked out of. The medical envelope remained on the floor, the diagnosis that would change everything now irrelevant in the face of the devastation that had just occurred. Slowly, as if moving through water, Sarah bent down and picked up the envelope. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. We need to start treatment immediately. With chemo and family support, we have a good chance. Family support, Sarah laughed, a broken, empty sound. What family? The man who was meant to be by her side during the hardest time of her life had just left her, and she hadn't even managed to tell him about the illness. Maybe it was better this way. Maybe it was a sign from fate. If Lucas didn't love her anymore, if she had become a stranger to him, then she would face this on her own, as she always had to. Sarah sank onto the couch, clutching the envelope to her chest, and for the first time in 20 years, she truly cried. She cried for the disease that lay ahead, for the marriage that was over, for the uncertain future that stretched before her like a dark, terrifying abyss. But deep down, in a tiny corner of her soul, a small flame still flickered. A flame that neither cancer nor abandonment could extinguish. The flame of survival, of a strength she didn't even know she possessed. And that flame, Sarah didn't know yet, would be the light that guided her through the darkness to come. 3 weeks later, Sarah was sitting in the waiting room of St. Vincent's Hospital, watching the people around her. There was an old woman knitting with shaky fingers, a middle-aged bloke flicking through a magazine without really reading it, and a young mum trying to soothe a crying baby. They all shared something in common: the fear of the unknown, the fragile hope that everything would turn out okay. The smell of disinfectant mixed with coffee from the vending machine created a strange atmosphere, almost comforting in its familiarity. Sarah had gotten used to this place over the past few weeks, the appointments, the tests, the medical explanations that sounded like a foreign language, and she'd done it all alone. Lucas hadn't come back home since that night. She found out from a mutual friend that he was shacked up in a flash apartment in the city. She also learned, from the same unsolicited source, that he was being spotted with a younger woman at fancy restaurants. The sting of betrayal was still there, throbbing like a half-healed wound, but Sarah had learned to live with it. She had more important things to worry about now. Sarah Miller, the nurse's voice cut through her thoughts. Yes, that's me. Sarah stood up, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. Inside, along with her medical documents, was a silk scarf her mum had given her years ago. She didn't need it yet, but she knew it would be a necessity soon. The hospital corridor was long and well lit, with abstract paintings on the walls in a feeble attempt to make the place less clinical. Sarah walked alongside the nurse, her steps echoing on the lino floor. It was strange how sounds were amplified there, as if the hospital was a resonating box for all the fears and hopes it held. "First round of chemo?" the nurse asked with a kind smile. "Yeah," Sarah nodded, trying to look braver than she felt. "A bit nervous, to be honest. That's normal, but you'll see it's not as scary as it seems, and Dr. Harrison is brilliant. You're in good hands, Dr. Harrison." Sarah had heard of him, but hadn't met him personally. Her previous oncologist had moved interstate, and she was transferred to this new doctor. All she knew was that he was considered one of the best in the city and had a flawless reputation. The chemo room was bigger than Sarah expected. There were several recliner chairs arranged in a semicircle, each with its own IV pole and medical equipment. Some were occupied by patients at different stages of treatment. A woman with grey hair was reading a book while the medication slowly dripped into her vein. A young bloke was talking quietly on the phone, laughing at something someone had said on the other end. "Sarah Miller," a deep, comforting male voice called her name. She turned and felt the air leave her lungs. The man approaching was tall, with light brown hair greying slightly at the temples, and green eyes that held a mix of competence and compassion. He wore a pristine white lab coat, but there was something about his relaxed posture that made him seem more approachable than most of the doctors she'd met. "I'm Dr. Jack Harrison. It's a pleasure to meet you." He extended his hand, and when Sarah shook it, she noticed his grip was firm and warm. "How are you feeling today?" "A bit on edge, to be honest." Sarah smiled, surprised by her own frankness. There was something about this bloke that made her feel safe enough to be vulnerable. "That's completely understandable. The first session always brings on a bit of anxiety, but I'll be here with you through the whole thing, explaining every step. Sound good?" Sarah nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief. It had been weeks since anyone had spoken to her that way, with that combination of professionalism and genuine care. It was as if, for the first time since the diagnosis, she wasn't completely on her own. "How about we sit and have a quick chat before we get started?" Jack gestured to a chair by the window. "I like to get to know my patients a bit better before we begin treatment." As she settled into the chair, Sarah watched the doctor prepare the equipment with precise, confident movements. His hands were skilled, but there was a softness to his gestures that put her at ease. "Are you living on your own, Sarah?" Jack asked while checking her medical file. The question caught her off guard. "Yeah, recently, yeah." He looked up from the paper, and Sarah saw something that looked a lot like understanding in his gaze. "Sometimes life chucks a whole lot of challenges at you at once, but I want you to know that here, you've got a whole team dedicated to your well-being." "Thanks." Sarah felt her eyes well up, but she managed to keep it together. That means a lot. Got any kids?" Jack continued, his voice keeping that gentle tone. "Nah, I always wanted to, but it never happened." Sarah hesitated. "And you?" "Got a daughter, Chloe, she's 10. His face lit up when he mentioned the child. "She's the light of my life." "That must be wonderful." Sarah smiled, a pang of melancholy piercing her heart. "Your wife must be a very lucky woman." Jack's expression darkened slightly. "I've been a widower for 3 years, a car accident." "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know." "No need to apologize. Life teaches us that we're tougher than we think, doesn't it?" He smiled, but there was an old sadness in his eyes. "Chloe and I learned to be a family of 2, and we found that love doesn't get smaller when it's shared between fewer people. In fact, sometimes it gets more intense." Sarah felt something shift inside her. It wasn't pity, but a kind of recognition. This man knew the pain of loss, the unexpected loneliness, the need to rebuild your life when everything comes crashing down. "Right, shall we get this show on the road?" Jack stood up, washing his hands carefully. "I'll explain every step, and if you feel any discomfort, you let me know straight away." The process was smoother than Sarah had expected. Jack chatted with her the whole time, telling funny stories about his daughter, talking about the books he liked to read, asking about her hobbies. It was as if he knew instinctively that she needed a distraction, a human connection. "You a fan of cooking?" he asked as he adjusted the drip. "Used to be. Cooked for my ex-husband every day. Now I don't see much point in cooking just for myself." "I get that. But you know, Chloe's always asking me to learn how to make fairy bread. I'm an absolute disaster in the kitchen." He laughed. "Maybe you could teach us some time?" Sarah looked at him, surprised. You You being serious? Deadly. Chloe loves meeting new people, and I reckon you two would get on like a house on fire. Besides, I believe cooking for someone who appreciates it is one of the best therapies going. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt something that resembled anticipation. I'd love that. Ripper, when you're feeling up to it, we'll sort it out. Jack checked his watch. Another 15 minutes and we'll be done for today. How are you feeling? Better than I expected. Sarah smiled. And it was true. Not just physically, but emotionally. There was something about this man, this conversation, that made her feel human again. Not just a patient, not just a deserted wife, but a person with value, with stories to tell, with something to offer. I'm rapt to hear that. And Sarah, Jack looked her directly in the eyes. I want you to know you're not on this journey alone. I know it might feel terrifying right now, but you're tougher than you think and we're going to beat this together. His words echoed in Sarah's chest like a balm. It had been so long since anyone had said together in reference to her. It had been so long since anyone saw strength where she only saw fragility. When the session was over, Sarah felt a strange burst of energy. It wasn't just the relief of getting through the first round of treatment, but something deeper. It was as if a door that had been shut for a long time had opened a little, letting in a sliver of light. See you next week then? Jack asked as he walked her to reception. Yeah, and Dr. Jack? Sarah hesitated for a moment. Thanks for everything, for making me feel normal. You are normal, Sarah. You're a brave woman facing a temporary challenge. Never forget that. As she walked to the car park, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not just hope that the treatment would work, but hope that maybe, just maybe, the best days of her life were still to come. The afternoon sun painted the sky in golden hues, and, for the first time since the diagnosis, Sarah stopped to admire the beauty of the moment. She took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air fill her lungs, and smiled. A small but genuine smile. She didn't know it yet, but that first chemo session had been so much more than a medical treatment. It had been the first step towards a new version of herself, a version she didn't even know existed, but one she was about to discover. 2 weeks later, Sarah was in Jack's kitchen, teaching Chloe how to make fairy bread. The girl had curly brown hair, just like her dad, and the same expressive green eyes. She had a contagious energy, a genuine curiosity about everything around her. Auntie Sarah, why do you wear that cool scarf on your head? Chloe asked, while spreading butter with total concentration. Sarah instinctively touched the blue silk scarf that covered her head. Her hair had started to fall out the week before, and she decided it was better to get ahead of it than wait to be bald. Because I'm doing a treatment that makes my hair fall out for a bit, but it's going to grow back even stronger. Like when I had my hair cut really short last year. Chloe smiled. Dad went a bit crazy, but I thought it was hilarious. Exactly like that. Sarah laughed, touched by the kid's natural way of seeing things. Your dad told me that story. He tells you everything? Chloe asked with a cheeky grin. Sarah felt her face flush. We chat a fair bit during my treatment. Dad smiles differently when he talks about you. Chloe kept spreading the hundreds and thousands as if she was making a casual observation about the weather. It's a smile he hasn't had for a long, long time. Before Sarah could answer, Jack walked into the kitchen carrying grocery bags. How are my two favorite chefs going? Dad, Auntie Sarah is teaching me the secret to perfect fairy bread. Chloe ran to hug her dad, leaving the butter knife on the bench. And what's the secret? Jack asked, kissing the top of his daughter's head before looking at Sarah, with a smile that confirmed exactly what Chloe had observed. Patience and a whole lot of love, Sarah replied, unable to tear her gaze from his green eyes. You can't rush it, and you've got to put a bit of your heart into every move. Wise words. Jack walked over to the bench, standing beside Sarah to watch her finish. She felt the warmth radiating from him, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with the aroma of the bread. Can I have a taste? Sarah picked up a clean knife and offered him a small piece. When Jack took a bite, he closed his eyes and sighed with satisfaction. That is bloody perfect, Chloe. You've got an excellent teacher. I know, Chloe yelled, running back to the bench. Auntie Sarah, can you come here every Saturday to cook with us? Sarah looked at Jack, searching for some sign that his daughter was being a bit full on. but all she saw was hope in his eyes. "If your dad doesn't mind," Sarah started. "I'd love it," Jack responded quickly. "Actually, I was thinking of asking you to have dinner with us tonight. Nothing flash, just a family meal." Family. The word echoed in Sarah's chest like a bell. It had been so long since she felt like she was part of a family. With Lucas, even in the best moments, there was always a distance, a formality she could never fully break. I'd love that too," Sarah smiled, feeling a strange and wonderful emotion spread through her chest. The dinner was a revelation. Jack cooked up a storm on the barbie, while Sarah and Chloe made a salad. The kitchen filled with laughter, overlapping conversations, and the kind of organized chaos that only a real family can create. "Auntie Sarah, were you ever married?" Chloe asked during dinner, with the bluntness typical of kids. "Chloe," Jack started to scold her, but Sarah interrupted. "It's okay. Yeah, Chloe, I was married for a long time. But sometimes people change and decide to go in different directions." "Like Mum and Dad?" Chloe asked, and Sarah saw Jack swallow hard. "No, darling, your mum and dad loved each other very much. They didn't choose to split up." Sarah chose her words carefully. "Sometimes life makes decisions for us. And sometimes we make decisions for our life," Jack added, looking directly at Sarah. "Sometimes we decide to be brave and accept good things that come our way." Their gaze held for a few seconds, loaded with meaning. Sarah felt her heart start to race, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. "Dad, you're looking at Auntie Sarah the way the prince looks at the princess in movies," Chloe observed, making the two adults laugh and shift slightly apart. "Chloe has a very vivid imagination," Jack explained, but his eyes still held a sparkle that Sarah couldn't name. After dinner, while Chloe watched cartoons in the living room, Sarah and Jack did the dishes together. It was a simple, everyday task, but there was an intimacy to it that Sarah hadn't expected. Their arms brushed against each other occasionally as they passed plates, and each contact sent small waves of electricity through her skin. "Sarah, can I ask you something personal?" Jack asked as he dried a glass. "Sure. Your ex-husband, does he know about the cancer?" Sarah stopped scrubbing the plate in her hands. "No. He asked for a divorce the same day I got the diagnosis. I didn't even get the chance to tell him." "Geez, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what that must have been like. It was devastating," Sarah admitted, her voice getting lower. "For a minute there I thought my life was over, that I had nothing left to fight for." "And now?" Sarah looked into the living room where Chloe was laughing at something on the TV. Then she looked at Jack, who was watching her with an intensity that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. "Now I know I was wrong. I have so much to fight for." Jack moved closer to her, raising a hand to gently touch her face. "You're an extraordinary woman, Sarah. Strong, kind, generous. Any man would be lucky to have you by his side." "Jack," Sarah whispered, feeling drawn to him like a magnet. "Dad, Auntie Sarah, come and see this." Chloe's voice broke the moment, but not the tension that had built between them. They slowly pulled away, but Jack held Sarah's hand for a moment before letting go. "Let's go see what our little director wants to show us." He smiled, but there was a promise in his eyes. In the living room, Chloe had found a photo album and was flipping through the pages with curiosity. "Look, this is Mum." She showed a photo of a beautiful blonde woman smiling radiantly next to Jack on a beach. "She was really pretty, wasn't she?" "She sure was." Jack sat down next to his daughter, wrapping an arm around her. "Your mum was a special woman." Sarah sat on Chloe's other side, looking at the photos. There was something painful about seeing Jack's past happiness, but also something comforting. He had loved deeply once. That meant he was capable of loving again. "Auntie Sarah, do you reckon Mum would be happy if Dad found someone to love again?" Chloe asked with the seriousness of a child trying to understand the adult world. Sarah looked at Jack, who seemed to have stopped breathing. "I think your mum would want you both to be happy," Sarah answered carefully. "And if your dad found someone who made him smile, who took good care of both of you, I think she'd be at peace." "You make Dad smile," Chloe stated simply, "and you take good care of us. Today was the most fun we've had in ages." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. "You guys make me so happy too, Chloe." "So maybe Mum already sent you to us." Chloe smiled, closing the album. "Dad always says she's watching over us from heaven." Jack looked at Sarah over his daughter's head, and she saw raw emotion in his eyes. It wasn't just attraction or affection, it was something deeper, more terrifying and more wonderful. When it was time for Sarah to leave, Chloe insisted on a long, tight hug.
"You're coming back next week for your chemo, right?"
The girl asked. "I sure am. And to cook with us on Saturday?" Sarah looked at Jack, who nodded with a smile. "If you'll have me."
"We will,"
Chloe yelled. "Right, Dad? More than you can imagine," Jack replied, looking directly at Sarah. On the drive home, Sarah drove in silence, processing everything that had happened. For the first time since the diagnosis, she wasn't thinking about the cancer, the chemo, or the uncertain future. She was thinking about laughter in the kitchen, about meaningful looks, about a 10-year-old girl who called her auntie with so much affection it made her heart ache with happiness. When she got home, to the house that had previously felt so empty and silent, Sarah looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. The blue scarf framed her face in a way that highlighted her eyes. She was thinner because of the treatment, but there was something different in her expression. A light that wasn't there before. For the first time in months, Sarah saw herself as a desirable woman. Not just a patient, not just an abandoned wife, but a woman with a lot of love to give and a lot of living to do. And for the first time since Lucas left, she fell asleep without crying. 6 months later, Sarah was unrecognizable. Not just physically, although her hair had started to grow back in soft curls that framed her face in a new and beautiful way, but in her very essence. There was a confidence in her movements, a light in her eyes that didn't exist before. She was in Jack's kitchen, preparing Chloe's birthday dinner, when she heard the key in the door. It was Saturday, and these family dinners had become the most anticipated part of her week. "I'm home," Jack's voice echoed through the house, followed by the sound of Chloe's quick footsteps running to greet him.
"Dad, Auntie Sarah is making that chocolate cake you love,"
Chloe yelled, and Sarah smiled at the excitement in the girl's voice. "Lucky me." Jack appeared in the kitchen, still in his hospital scrubs. His eyes met Sarah's immediately, and that special smile, the one Chloe had noticed months ago, lit up his face. "How was your shift?" Sarah asked, turning to him with her hands covered in cake batter. "Long, but worth it. We saved a life today, and now I'm here with the 2 most important women in my life." Sarah felt her heart race. Over the past few months, they had grown closer and closer, but Jack had always kept a respectful distance. He knew she was going through a delicate time, and he never pushed for anything more than friendship and companionship.
"Jack,"
Sarah began, but was interrupted by Chloe. "Dad, can you help Auntie Sarah with the cake? I'm going to set the table for dinner." Alone in the kitchen, Sarah and Jack worked side by side in comfortable silence. But there was a tension in the air, an electricity that had been building for weeks. "Sarah, can I tell you something?" Jack asked while whisking the cream. "Always." "Today at the hospital, one of my colleagues asked if I was dating anyone, and for the first time in 3 years, I wanted to say yes." Sarah stopped stirring the batter, her heart pounding. "And why didn't you?" "Because I don't know if you're ready. I don't know if I have the right to hope you feel the same way I do." Sarah turned to him fully, seeing raw vulnerability in his eyes. "And what do you feel?" Jack put the bowl on the counter and moved closer to her, raising his hands to touch her face. "I've fallen in love with you, Sarah. Completely, utterly, head over heels in love with your strength, your kindness, the way you make Chloe laugh, the way you make me want to be a better man." Sarah felt tears well up in her eyes. "Jack, I know you've been through a lot. I know maybe it's too soon, or that you might not be ready for another relationship, but I needed you to know." "You want to know what I feel?" Sarah whispered, her hands going up to cover his on her face. "More than anything, I feel like for the first time in my life, I know what it's like to be truly loved. Not out of obligation, not out of habit, but for who I really am." The tears were flowing freely now. "I've fallen for you too, Jack, for you and for Chloe. You guys saved me." "Nah." Jack shook his head, moving even closer. "You saved yourself. We were just lucky enough to be here when you decided to shine." The kiss that followed was inevitable. Soft at first, hesitant, as if they were both testing the reality of the moment. But then it deepened, loaded with months of pent-up tension, of feelings that had been growing in silence. "You're kissing." Chloe's voice made them pull apart quickly, but they were both smiling. "Chloe," Jack started, but the girl interrupted him. "Finally, I was starting to think you were never going to kiss." She ran to them, hugging them both at the same time. "Does this mean Auntie Sarah is going to live with us?" Sarah and Jack looked at each other over the girl's head, both laughing. "Let's take it slow, kiddo," Jack said. "But yeah, this means we're a family now." Family. The word that Sarah thought she would never hear again applied to her. And now, there in that kitchen full of love and laughter, she finally understood the difference between being married and being home. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Lucas Carter was sitting on the couch in his expensive empty apartment, looking at the woman sleeping beside him. Brianna was 28, with platinum blonde hair and a body that made other blokes turn their heads. She was everything he thought he wanted. Young, hot, no complications. But as he watched her sleep, Lucas felt strangely hollow. Brianna was 4 months pregnant, and although he should have been happy about the prospect of finally becoming a dad, all he felt was a growing anxiety. Brianna was different from Sarah in every way. Where Sarah was gentle, Brianna was demanding. Where Sarah was understanding, Brianna was a drama queen. Where Sarah cooked with love, Brianna ordered food with an app. And where Sarah loved him unconditionally, Brianna seemed more interested in his money and status. Lucas quietly got up and went to the window, looking out at the lit-up city. It had been months since he'd thought about Sarah, or at least tried not to. But lately, especially with Brianna's pregnancy, he'd found himself remembering conversations he'd had with his ex-wife about having kids, about what it would be like to raise a family together. "Lucas," Brianna's sleepy voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Get back to bed. The baby's kicking." Lucas went back to the room, placing his hand on Brianna's belly. The baby moved beneath his palm, and he should have felt joy, excitement, love, but all he felt was a strange melancholy. "You're thinking about her again?" Brianna said. It wasn't a question. "Don't be ridiculous." "Lucas, I'm not a moron. Every time you get all distant and moody, it's because you're thinking about your ex-wife." Brianna sat up in bed, annoyed. "When are you going to get over it?" "I'm over it. I'm here with you, aren't I?" "Physically, yeah, but your head." Brianna shook her head. "Sometimes I wonder if you actually love me or if I'm just a convenient distraction." Lucas didn't answer, because he didn't know what to say. The truth was, he didn't know what he felt for anyone anymore. He was sure he didn't love Sarah when he asked for the divorce, but now he wasn't sure of anything. "I'm going to have a shower." Brianna got up, clearly fed up. "When I get back, I hope you've decided if you want to be in this relationship or not." Alone in the room, Lucas lay down and closed his eyes. But instead of seeing Brianna, instead of thinking about the baby on the way, all he could see was Sarah's face the night he asked for the divorce. The pain in her eyes, the way she tried to tell him something important and he wouldn't let her. For the first time in months, Lucas wondered if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Back at Jack's place, Chloe's birthday party was in full swing. It was a small celebration, just a few school friends and their families, but the house was full of laughter and cheer. Sarah watched Jack playing with the kids in the garden, her heart overflowing with love. He was a wonderful dad, patient and caring, and seeing him with Chloe and her friends made her imagine what it would be like if they had kids together. The thought surprised her. Months ago, she thought her chance at being a mum had passed forever. But now, at 48, with the cancer in remission and a new love blooming, she allowed herself to dream again. "Auntie Sarah." Chloe ran up to her, her face flushed from playing. "Guess what? Dad said we can get a dog." "Seriously?" Sarah laughed, looking at Jack, who was approaching with a guilty smile. "She talked me into it," he said, wrapping an arm around Sarah's waist in a gesture that had become second nature. "She said every family needs a dog, and she's right." Sarah smiled, leaning into him. "What kind of dog are you thinking?" "A golden retriever," Chloe shouted. "Big and fluffy, and that likes kids." "Sounds perfect." Sarah kissed the top of the girl's head. "We'll have to think of a name." "We?" Jack asked quietly, just for her to hear. "We," Sarah confirmed, looking into his eyes. "If you want, I want everything with you," Jack whispered, kissing her forehead. "Everything." As she watched Chloe play with her friends, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace settle in her chest. Her life hadn't gone according to plan. It had been harder, more painful, more terrifying than she ever imagined. But it had also been richer, more real, more full of love than she had ever dreamed possible. The cancer had taken so much from her hair, her energy, her sense of security. But it had also given her something precious, the clarity to recognize true love when it showed up. And now, surrounded by laughter and love, Sarah knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The last day of chemo arrived on a sunny spring morning. Sarah woke up early, not with anxiety like in the first months, but with a strange mix of relief and anticipation. Today marked the end of one chapter and the start of another. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, admiring the brown curls that now covered her head. The hair had grown back differently, thicker, and with a texture she'd never had before. It was as if even her hair had decided to be reborn stronger. "Ready for the big day?" Jack asked, appearing behind her in the mirror. He had stayed the night, something that had been happening more often in recent weeks. "More than ready," Sarah turned into his arms, smiling. "I'm ready to start the rest of my life." "Our rest of our lives," Jack corrected her, kissing her forehead. "Chloe is already up and insisting on coming to the hospital with us. She wants to be there to celebrate. Of course she can come, she's a part of all this." At the hospital, the medical team had prepared a small celebration. It was a tradition to mark a patient's final day of treatment, and Sarah felt touched to see the familiar faces that had accompanied her throughout the journey. "Congratulations, Sarah," the head nurse said, handing her a symbolic certificate. "You were one of the bravest patients we've ever had the pleasure of treating." "Thank you. You all became my family during these months." Jack was by her side, holding her hand, while Chloe took photos with his phone. "For the family album," the girl declared, making everyone laugh. After the final session, they walked down the hospital corridors toward the exit. Sarah felt light, as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Not just the weight of the illness, but the weight of a life that wasn't truly hers. "Let's go out for a celebratory lunch," Jack suggested when they reached the main foyer. "Can we go to that Italian place Chloe loves?" Sarah asked. "Sure thing, and after that we can go look at the golden retriever puppies I found online." Chloe jumped up and down with excitement. They were laughing and making plans when Sarah heard a familiar voice call her name. "Sarah?" She turned slowly, and her heart almost stopped. Lucas was standing a few meters away next to a visibly pregnant blonde woman. He looked older, with tired lines around his eyes, and there was something in his expression she couldn't figure out. "Lucas," Sarah said calmly, her voice steady despite the shock. Lucas's eyes swept over her face, noticing her short hair, her radiant skin, the sparkle in her eyes. She was different, transformed in a way he couldn't fully grasp. You're all right?" he asked, clearly confused. "I heard you were sick." Sarah felt Jack move closer to her, his presence comforting and protective. Chloe hid behind Jack, watching the scene with curiosity. "I'm fantastic," Sarah replied, her voice clear and confident. "In fact, I've never been better." "But what are you doing at the hospital?" Lucas insisted, his eyes flicking from Sarah to Jack and then to Chloe. "Today was my last day of chemo," Sarah said simply. "I'm in remission." Lucas's face went pale. "Chemo, Sarah, you had cancer?" "I did," Sarah corrected, "and I beat it." "But when? How? Why didn't you tell me?" The questions came out in a rush, and Sarah saw something like despair in his eyes. "Remember the day you asked for a divorce, Lucas?" Sarah asked, her voice maintaining a calm tone. "I had just left the doctor's office. I was going to tell you about the diagnosis, but you didn't give me the chance." Lucas stumbled as if he'd been punched. "No, it can't be. You were going to tell me, and You said you didn't love me anymore and that you wanted a divorce," Sarah finished. "And you know what? It was the best thing that could have ever happened." "How can you say that?" Lucas looked desperate now. "Because it forced me to discover who I really am." Sarah smiled, and it was a genuine smile without bitterness. "It forced me to find my own strength, my own worth, and it led me to the people who truly love me." She looked at Jack and Chloe, her heart overflowing with love. "Lucas, I'd like you to meet my family. This is Jack, my fiancé, and this is Chloe, my daughter of the heart." The word fiancé echoed in the air like thunder. Jack looked at Sarah in surprise. They hadn't talked about marriage yet, but the smile that spread across his face showed he completely approved of the declaration. "Fiancé," Lucas repeated in disbelief. "Sarah, you can't be serious. We only got divorced a few months ago." 8 months ago, Sarah corrected. 8 months during which I faced cancer on my own, rebuilt myself from the ground up and found true love. 8 months that changed my life completely. The blonde woman beside Lucas shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing the tension in the situation. "Sarah, I made a mistake," Lucas said, his voice cracking. "If I had known about the cancer, I never would have." "Never would have what?" Sarah interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "Abandoned me when I needed you most?" "Lucas, you didn't leave me because you didn't know about the cancer. You left me because you didn't love me anymore, and you know what? I thank you for that." "How can you thank me?" Lucas seemed distraught now. "Because you set me free to find someone who loves me for real. Someone who sees my strength where you only saw weakness. Someone who wants to build a life with me, not just share a house." Sarah looked at Jack with so much love that it broke Lucas's heart. "Dad, can we go?" Chloe whispered to Jack, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Sure, princess," Jack replied, wrapping his arm around Sarah. "Sarah, you ready?" "More than ready." Sarah turned to Lucas one last time. "Lucas, I genuinely hope you're happy. I hope you find with your family what I've found with mine." She started to walk away, but Lucas called out to her again. "Sarah, wait, please. Can we talk? Just the two of us." Sarah stopped and turned slowly. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "There's nothing left for us to talk about, Lucas. You made your choice 8 months ago, and I made mine today. I choose love, family, and happiness. I choose the life I've always dreamed of having." She took Jack's hand and Chloe's hand, and the three of them walked toward the hospital exit. Behind them, Lucas stood still, watching the woman he had abandoned walk away from him with a dignity and a strength he had never seen before. "Lucas." Brianna's voice brought him back to reality. "Who was that woman?" Lucas looked at the pregnant woman beside him, then at the door Sarah had walked through. "That was my ex-wife," he said softly. "She's different than I remembered." "She is different," Lucas admitted, a deep pain settling in his chest. "She became the woman I never knew she could be." Outside the hospital, Sarah took a deep breath of the fresh spring air. The sun was shining in the blue sky, and she felt as if she was breathing for the first time in years. "You really want to marry me?" Jack asked quietly, still processing what had happened. "More than anything in the world," Sarah replied, turning to kiss him. "If you want to, of course." "I want everything with you," Jack whispered against her lips. "Marriage, kids, dogs, a lifetime of Saturdays in the kitchen." "Oh, are you guys going to kiss again?" Chloe complained, but she was smiling. "Get used to it, little one." Sarah laughed, hugging the girl. "There's going to be a lot of kissing around here." As they walked to the car, Sarah looked back one last time. Through the hospital windows, she could see Lucas still standing in the foyer, a solitary figure surrounded by all the life that was continuing around him. For a moment, she felt sorry for him. But only for a moment, because Sarah had learned that looking back was a waste of time when you had such a brilliant future waiting for you. And her future, she knew now. It was going to be extraordinary. 6 months later, on a golden autumn morning, Sarah stood in front of the mirror in her new bedroom, adjusting the simple but elegant wedding dress she had chosen. It was a silk ivory gown that highlighted her radiant skin and the brown curls that now reached her shoulders. "You look beautiful, Auntie Sarah," Chloe said from the doorway, wearing a light blue dress that matched the flowers she would carry in the ceremony. "Thanks, my love." Sarah turned to the girl who had become her daughter in every way that mattered. "Ready to be my official bridesmaid?" "Ready!" Chloe jumped up and down with excitement. "And Max is ready too." Max was the golden retriever they had adopted 3 months earlier. A golden, fluffy puppy who had completed their family perfectly. Today, he would carry the rings on a special pillow. The ceremony would be small, in the garden of the house that Sarah and Jack had bought together. It was a cozy house with a big kitchen where they spent Saturdays cooking, a garden where Chloe played with Max, and an office where Sarah had started writing a blog about her journey of healing and rebirth. "Sarah," Jack's voice came from the hallway.
Can I come in? I know I'm not supposed to see you before the ceremony, but...
Come on in, Sarah laughed. I think we've broken enough traditions to worry about this one. Jack walked into the room, handsome in his navy blue suit, and stopped when he saw her. My God, you're perfect. We're perfect, Sarah corrected, moving closer to him. You, me, Chloe, Max, our crazy and wonderful family. I love you so much it hurts sometimes, Jack whispered, gently touching her face. I know, I feel the same, Sarah smiled. Who would have thought that the worst thing that ever happened to me would lead me to the best thing in my life? Fate has a funny way of working, doesn't it? Jack agreed.
Dad, Auntie Sarah, the guests are arriving,
Chloe shouted from the window. The ceremony was exactly what Sarah had always dreamed a wedding should be, full of love, laughter, and happy tears. The celebrant was a friend of Jack's, and the words he said about second chances and true love brought a tear to every eye. When it was time for their vows, Sarah looked into Jack's green eyes and spoke from the heart. Jack, when I met you, I was broken. Not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. You taught me that being strong doesn't mean not needing anyone. It means choosing the right people to share your strength with. You taught me that true love isn't about being perfect, but about being accepted exactly as you are. And you taught me that family isn't about blood, but about choice. I choose you today and every single day of my life. Jack was crying when it was his turn. Sarah, you came into my life like a silent whirlwind, changing everything without me even realizing it. You brought light into dark corners I didn't even know existed. You taught me that it's possible to honor the past while embracing the future. You made Chloe smile in a way I hadn't seen in years, and you made me believe in love again. I promise to love you through sickness and health, through good times and bad, through every moment life throws at us. When they kissed as husband and wife, the applause echoed through the garden, mixed with Max's happy barks and Chloe's shouts of, "Finally!" The reception was intimate and warm. Sarah danced with Jack under the fairy lights they had hung in the trees, feeling like a princess in her own fairy tale. But the best moment was when Chloe joined them on the dance floor, and the three of them danced together as the family they were always meant to be. On the other side of the city, Lucas was sitting in his silent apartment, looking out the window. Brianna had given birth to a boy 3 months ago, but motherhood hadn't brought the happiness she expected. She constantly complained about being tired, the lack of freedom, the way the pregnancy had changed her body. Lucas tried to be a good dad, but there was a disconnect between him and the baby that he couldn't explain. Maybe it was because every time he looked at his son, he thought about how different it would have been with Sarah. How she would have been a loving and dedicated mother. How she would have turned that cold apartment into a house full of love. He had seen photos of Sarah's wedding on social media. A mutual friend had posted a few images, and Lucas couldn't resist looking. Sarah was radiant, more beautiful than he had ever seen her. And the man beside her, Jack, looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. It was exactly how Lucas should have looked at her, but never did.
Lucas, the baby's crying again,
Brianna yelled from the bedroom, irritation clear in her voice. Lucas sighed and got up to help, but as he walked down the hallway, all he could think about was how he had wasted 20 years with the most incredible woman he had ever known, and how now it was too late to fix the mistake. 2 years later, Sarah was in the garden of her house, watching Chloe play with Max, while Jack fired up the Barbie. She was 6 months pregnant, a miracle that doctors had said was possible, but unlikely after chemo. "How are you feeling?" Jack asked, walking over to her and placing a hand on her belly. "Perfect," Sarah smiled, covering his hand with hers. "Absolutely perfect. Boy or girl, what do you reckon?" "Doesn't matter. All that matters is that it's ours." Chloe ran up to them, Max barking happily behind her.
Mum Sarah, when the baby's born, I'm going to teach them how to play ball.
Mum Sarah, the title Chloe had started using naturally a few months after the wedding. Sarah never tired of hearing it. "I'm sure you'll be the best big sister in the world," Sarah said, kissing the girl's forehead. As she watched her family, Jack flipping the meat on the Barbie, Chloe teaching Max tricks, the baby moving in her belly. Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The cancer had been terrible, but it had also been a gift. It had forced her to discover her own strength, to value what truly mattered, to recognize true love when it appeared. Lucas had been an important chapter in her life, but not the end of the story. In fact, he had just been the prologue to the real life she was living now. Sarah placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. "Thank you," she whispered, not knowing exactly who she was thanking. To God, to fate, to life in general. "What for?" Jack asked, coming closer to her. "For everything. For the illness that brought me to you. For the strength I didn't know I had. For this incredible family. For this second chance at happiness." Jack kissed her softly. "It wasn't a second chance, love. It was the first real chance you had to live the life you deserved." Sarah smiled, knowing he was right. Her life with Lucas had been an existence, a routine, a habit. But this was real life. Life with all the colors, all the flavors, all the emotions she had denied herself for so long. The sun began to set, painting the sky in golden and pink shades. Sarah leaned into Jack, watching Chloe play in the garden, feeling the baby move in her belly, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Sometimes, she thought, you have to lose everything to discover what's truly worth having. And sometimes, the worst things that happen to you are just the universe making space for the best things. Sarah Miller died the day Lucas asked for a divorce. But from the ashes of that woman, a new Sarah had been born. A Sarah who was stronger, braver, more capable of loving and being loved. And that Sarah was just beginning to live. Blimey, what a roller coaster. If you were hooked by Sarah's incredible comeback, give that like button a good crack. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will have you on the edge of your seat. And tell us in the comments below, have you ever had a shocker of a moment turn out to be the start of something amazing? Share your story.